The trauma bay at Coronado Naval Medical had never seen anything like the night 6 wounded SEALs were wheeled in at once. Blood soaking through field dressings, machines screaming alarms nobody had time to silence. The senior surgeon on call had been pulled into an unrelated emergency 2 floors up, and for one terrifying minute, the only medical staff standing in that bay was a woman most of the on-call team barely knew, a quiet trauma nurse named Josephine Reyes who had transferred in from a rural clinic only 4 months earlier. When she stepped forward and began calling out orders like she'd done this 100 times before, one young resident actually laughed, a short, nervous, disbelieving sound. "She's going to run this," he muttered to another nurse, shaking his head as he reached for his phone to call for backup. Nobody was laughing an hour later. If you've ever had someone underestimate you the moment it mattered most, stay with me, because Josephine's story is about to show you what happens when quiet competence meets chaos nobody else can handle. She had grown up the daughter of an army combat medic who never talked about the things he'd seen, but who had taught her almost by accident how to keep her hands steady when everything around her was falling apart. She'd spent 3 years working trauma in a border town clinic with no backup generator and no specialist on call, which meant she'd learned to stabilize gunshot wounds, control catastrophic bleeding, and make split-second decisions with nothing but her training and her nerve. None of that appeared on her transfer paperwork. All anyone here saw was a soft-spoken new hire who kept to herself in the break room that night. As 6 men who had walked into an ambush during a training exercise gone wrong bled out on 6 different tables, Josephine didn't wait for permission or reinforcements. She triaged in seconds, sending the 2 most critical patients into surgery herself while directing to junior nurses through compressions and 4 lines on the others with a calm, clipped authority that silenced every doubt in the room. When the attending trauma surgeon finally burst through the doors 12 minutes later, gloved and gowned, he found a scene he didn't expect. Josephine's hands already inside an open abdominal wound, clamping a bleeding vessel with a precision that made him stop cold in the doorway. "Who taught you that technique?" he asked, stunned. "Nobody," she said without looking up. "I just couldn't let him die waiting for someone with a better title." For the next 4 hours, Josephine moved between tables like she'd been born for exactly this moment, guiding 2 SEALs through emergency surgery herself when there weren't enough surgeons to go around, and coaching a terrified young corpsman through applying a tourniquet correctly on a leg wound that would have cost a man his life if done wrong. The resident who had laughed at her now stood frozen, holding a retractor exactly where she told him to, watching a woman he'd dismissed an hour earlier become the only reason 6 families wouldn't receive a knock on their door that night. By dawn, all 6 men were stable. Every single one survived, something the on-call surgeon later admitted, in a report that would circulate through the base for weeks. Should not have been statistically possible given the severity of their wounds and the chaos of their arrival. When Admiral Voss, the base commander, arrived that morning to check on his men, he asked who had run point during the crisis, expecting to hear a name with rank and reputation attached. Instead, he heard a nervous ensign stammer out, "The new trauma nurse. Sir Reyes, she just took over, she saved them." If this story is making your chest tighten a little, you're not alone, and I'd be grateful if you hit like and subscribe right now, because these are the kinds of quiet heroes history almost forgets to mention. The Admiral found Josephine sitting alone in the break room hours later, her scrubs still stained, hands finally trembling now that the adrenaline had faded. Tears she hadn't allowed herself during the crisis quietly falling at last. He sat down across from her, said nothing about protocol or paperwork,